Call of Duty, a popular video game, has sold over 32 million copies in 2016 alone. Video games have had a history of violence, and some people believe by playing violent video games will cause you to commit violent acts. Today I'm going to talk about how violent video games are good for your mental health, how they can teach you lessons on morality, and how people can understand the difference between the virtual versus reality. So let's begin with mental health. My opponents believe by playing violent video games will cause aggression. And according to the journal in PMC, if you play a violent video game, you will show more aggression. So the line of thinking is by playing a violent video game will cause aggression because in their studies it showed rates of aggression going up, but this is just competitiveness in my opinion, and they think the aggression will lead to a violent act being committed. But violent video games in fact release stress, and according to the Journal of Adolescent Health, 61.9% of boys played violent video games to relax. And so men at work, they're having a bad day, their boss yelled at them, and children, 16 when I say children, at school, they're having a bad day, their teacher's yelling at them, they're getting bad tests. They come home and they sit on the couch, put a violent video game in, shoot up the bad guys, and this is a reward system, and that they start feeling good, and it releases their stress. Violent video games can actually encourage civic engagement and pro-social behavior. A study in a journal called Computers and Human Behavior states there will be a small increase of pro-social behavior and civic engagement in individuals that play action games. And that's because there's a feature in a lot of these first-person shooters called multiplayer. So in Call of Duty, for example, you could be cooperating online with millions of gamers and competing on teams with each other, and this learned social behavior can carry on into the real world. Next I'd like to talk about how violent video games can teach lessons on morality. So violent video games can teach lessons on morality, but my opponents argue that Columbine shooters, they played violent video games. In the Daily News article, the Columbine shooters were immersed in their violence-filled Doom video games. Doom was a popular video game in the 90s and still is today. And in the game, it was a first-person shooter. You do a bunch of killing sprees against the bad guys, and my opponents think that because those Columbine shooters played that game and they're doing the killing spree, that they would do that in real life. But the mentally ill can be gamers, but not all gamers are mentally ill. The Huffington Post says over 61 million Americans are mentally ill, and Polygon says over 155 million people are gamers. So with those facts, we know that there's more gamers than there are mentally ill. So sure, there's some crossover from a gamer that's also mentally ill, but its correlation does not equal causation. That old saying still stands. More video games can teach lessons on morality. A study in Journal of Human Technology says gamers can make sense of all the violence by learning about the characters' motivations, the moral dilemmas, and consequences of action. So I played a lot of Call of Duty, Battlefield, Halo in my day, and that was because it was fun to learn about the story and the historical accuracy, and I got to learn about the consequences for my actions, and it's a lot different playing with a controller versus just watching on TV. Same effect, but it was much more engaging. And here you can see that this is Call of Duty, and it's at a soldier's funeral, fallen comrade, and you get to press X to pay respects. That's a unique feature that I think can teach a lot of adolescents and children about war and the consequences of it. Next, I'd like to talk about how gamers can understand the difference between virtual and reality. So gamers know what's real and what's fake. My opponents argue that violent video games will desensitize you, and in the Journal of Experimental Social Psychology, they state gamers get physiologically numb to violence if you play violent video games. And this isn't unique to just video games. This happens when you watch television, movies, or even just plain old news. The longer you're exposed to violence, the more desensitized you'll be. You may lack empathy, and that's more of a society question. It's up for society to decide what to do about that. Gamers will not reenact what they see. Study and Learning Media Technology, it says adult gamers do not think violent video games were realistic representations of life. That's because gamers understand pixels versus what's real. Shooting up a bad guy on on a TV, on television, it's much different than killing a flesh and blood human being. Now the TV, I can make the argument, is more troublesome because it's actual people doing heinous evil acts in movies as well. But the bottom line is fantasy, regardless what platform of entertainment you're using, video games, television, or movies. So let's review. I've told you today about why video games are good for your mental health, how they can teach you lessons on morality, and how gamers can understand the difference between virtual versus real. Video games have had a history of violence, and some people believe it leads people to commit violent acts. I've showed you examples of how this is untrue. The fact is, violent video games sales have increased while juvenile crime rates have decreased. Video games aren't going anywhere, and it's global now. Video games are just another form of entertainment that the older generation is just going to have to learn to wrap their heads around. Thank you.